Okay, it's October 19th, 2020. This is Roqe. Persian piano powerhouse progeny. There are few names in Iranian music more well known than Maestro Anushirvan Rohani, but more recently it's his son who is making waves as a popular performer around the world on the same instrument. Piano star Reza Rohani joins me for a feature interview today about being the musical heir apparent, dabbling in both classical and jazz styles, gaining celebrity as a TV star, and finding mass success on Instagram. Reza Rohani joins us from California, plus the Roqe team on letters and therapy. This is Conversations from, to, and about the Iranian diaspora. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. This is Roqe. Hi there, welcome to episode number 54 of Roqe. Salam Dostan Aziz. We are coming to you on iTunes, YouTube, Instagram, SoundCloud, Telegram, and Spotify. Telegram and Spotify. امیدوار هستم که دماغتون چاقه.
What?
You heard me.
Yes, this time you nailed it.
Is that a thing?
Well, it's a thing for some of us. Young Keon,
I've never
with
heard
your
of
perfect little upturned nose.
Shia, what? What is he talking out of his behind?
امیدوارم دماغتون چاق باشه.
What does that mean?
It's like
I
امیدوارم
know what it
کیفتون
literally-
کوک باشه. It's
I hope that you're finding success.
Like you're eating a lot and your nose turns fat?
I don't think we need to get into the details.
Okay.
I'm excited. I'm excited to have Reza Rohani joining us today. Not only a star piano player and recording artist himself, but part of quite a lineage of musicians. Shia, I think you know who his father is. I'll bet you. Have you met his father?
Yes. Yeah, I met him actually, and it was in a party in Tehran, and
I should say we're talking about Maestro Anushirvan
Exactly.
Rohani, the great piano player and composer.
Yes, and he played, and Taha sang with him, my brother, and sang with him, and I was super excited.
Now, Keon, you were saying I'm excited about Reza Rohani. I know who he is, and I know he was one of the stars of the Stage program, and looking forward to talking to him about all kinds of things, including being the son of a very famous Iranian, and of course Reza carving out an important career for himself too. You weren't sure. I don't think you haven't heard of him, right?
I'm not familiar with
so
him.
you'll once we do the interview, you'll be more familiar. But have you ever been to a Persian birthday party?
Of course.
Or had one yourself? Right.
Persian birthday party?
Yeah.
I mean, there were Persians there.
Okay.
Yes, sure.
And what did they sing for you?
Tavallud,
Tavallud,
tavallud.
Tavallud Mubarak. You know who that was written by?
No idea.
Reza Rohani's father.
You're kidding.
I am not
Really?
kidding.
Wow, that's some claim to fame.
Not so bad, huh? Captain Reza?
That was crazy. I had no idea.
You didn't know that either?
No, I didn't know.
There you go.
No, I didn't know.
You learn something each day.
Yeah.
I thought it just naturally appeared. That song.
That's right. Some songs just naturally appear. This is the thing. People need to know. There are creators of these things. Actually, I want to ask Reza Rohani if, in light of all that we've talked about in terms of copyright and publishing and compensation and recognition for artists and creators and composers, whether his dad gets any compensation for the fact that he's written arguably the most famous contemporary piece of Iranian music, like the Happy Birthday of Iranian Persian culture. I'm guessing he's going to say no, in Iran. Well, see, I don't know. How was your weekend, Kian Docht?
It was all right. I went to a drive-in concert. It was different.
Yes.
I mean, I did.
You sit in your car and somebody plays music for you.
Not the same. And it's like from a distance, so the stage is very far. And the whole point of going to a concert is seeing people, you know, close and being in that auditorium and listening to live music. It just wasn't the same. You were in your car and listening to
How many of you were in the car?
There was 2 of us, yes.
Who'd you go with?
Moving on. So,
Are we not allowed to know?
No,
Well,
it was. So how was your week?
Was it? Let me ask you this way: was it romantic? At least going to the drive-in concert.
It was. Yes, it was a date.
Well, so you're in the car, and
Let me put this
one
out there.
song leads to
the
another.
Whole point, the whole point of going on dates for me most of the time is to do things that I want to do. So you know, if I like back pre-COVID times, I would always want to go to the opera, ballet, symphonies. A lot of my friends don't have the same interests as me. So whenever
So now you're sitting in a car.
Yes.
Watching it. What kind of a concert was it?
I love old music. So Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday. That was the whole reason for me to go. Yes, old jazz.
That's in the category of crooners and jazz.
Yeah, and then it kind of
tying this in with Reza Rohani.
Right. Yeah. So then it kind of had some Aretha Franklin and Beyonce, which I'm not a huge fan of.
Okay, not
but anyway,
so much jazz.
It obviously was not the actual artist singing the songs.
You're saying that Ella Fitzgerald and Beyonce were not there.
No,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ella Fitzgerald.
And so this was a long way of telling us that you went to
that I went to this concert on Saturday
in a
night.
car with your on a date.
Yes.
Now let's get back to the part where you said dates are so that you can be taken to the opera or the ballet or what was that?
It's like my mandatory +1. And let me make this clear. I like ahead of time, I'll kind of look at the season of opera or ballet and what's coming, and I buy tickets ahead of time. And I basically have to beg my friends to come to these things with me.
Not this special friend, though.
Not this special friend. So, you know, I wanted to go to this thing.
Now, if the special friend,
yes.
I mean, we're not allowed to know their name, so I don't know. Okay. If he or she
does not have an interest in this, they
Right.
are forced to go to this.
What if they want to go to see a hockey game and you're not as into it?
That's too bad for them. Isn't
You
it?
don't. You don't.
No, I like basketball. Hockey, I'm not a fan of.
So you wouldn't go.
I would not go. No.
Wow.
No.
You're not an easy person to.
Listen, we all have our thing, and you know, and
it's Keon's way or the.
Keon's way or the highway.
No, that is
highway.
not true. I will put up with it, but I prefer not to watch hockey. What about you,
I was
Jian?
using it as an example. What about
just
me?
Trying to change.
I
the
spent the
subject.
whole weekend
Feeling like
not
you're-
going anywhere.
Because you thought you had COVID.
Well, I think I've had COVID at least 20 times, but I don't think I have. But no, now that it's surging again, I'm staying around my house. Other than like, I saw one person and took Oogie for a walk and a few times, but that's it.
Well, I'll tell you
I don't
this
want to
much.
go. I'm not like you running around town to the ballet.
It was
in the middle of a pandemic.
It was a
all right?
drive-in concert. I'll tell you this much: I will not be going to any more drive-in concerts. So I got more cookbooks for a winter of staying in and doing.
You mean
nothing.
because it didn't do anything for you?
No.
So speaking of your relationship,
I shot myself in the foot with that one.
no, your relationship ebbs and flows, your ups and downs, your interests. Tina Parsaman, who was on the show last Thursday,
Right.
and she's doing therapy in Tehran now. She was living in New Zealand for most of her life. Why am I telling you this as if you didn't listen to the interview?
I did.
You were
I was
here.
very
We talked about it. Yes.
Yes, I was very engaged.
And she's, I guess a lot of people are interested in talking about relationships right now because her star is rising as a therapist who talks about
I
that.
find that so interesting. When you asked her, what do people come to you most for to therapy sessions in Tehran? And she said relationships. I don't know why I find that shocking because there's so many other issues that are in Tehran.
I found that not shocking.
Really?
Yeah, I guess I thought, well, that makes sense, especially in. I mean, she said her demographic is relatively young. It's people in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
So they're concerned about relationships. But I mean, that's what you go. Therapy is all about.
True,
that, isn't
true.
it?
You're not
so your
gonna go
relationship
in
with your
there
parents, your relationship with your
Right.
family, your relationship with your kids, your relationship
You're not
with your
going to
loved
go
one.
in there and talk about the economy, like, what is, what can you do
I
about
do.
that?
Yeah, all my sessions with my therapists are about economics.
After
Yeah.
every headline,
Yeah.
Jian is at a therapy.
Oh God, yeah, you probably go.
So I invoked the name Tina Parsaman because I know we got a bunch of letters about that, about Jane Lewison and the Gul Ha Project, all on our last episode. So we're going to get to some of that with the letters of the day, right? All right. Captain Reza, Groovy Shaya, Kian Ducht, the fabulous Kian. We'll get to you in a little while. Let me bring in our featured guest. Our featured guest today is not just an Iranian, German, American piano star in his own right in the classical and jazz genres. He also comes from, as we've discussed, some royal lineage when it comes to music in Iran. In fact, he happens to be the son of one of the greatest Iranian pianists and composers of all time. Take a listen to this. A little taste of Maestro Anushirvan Rohani in concert in 2013, performing with his son, my guest today, Reza Rohani. Reza is a composer, producer, pianist, and musician for film and TV based in Los Angeles. He's come to global attention for his beautiful and novel fusion of jazz sounds with Iranian, European, and Middle Eastern influences. Reza was born into a famous musical family, but left Iran for Germany in the early 1990s as a teenager, where he studied classical and jazz music before returning to Iran to record his first album. Reza Rohani is also well known to Persians across the diaspora for becoming famous in his role as a judge on the popular weekly Manoto music talent program Stage. Recently, in the time of COVID, Reza has taken to his Instagram platform to post music with his musical partner Sarah Nayani, where he sits at the piano, she sings, and then they get hundreds of thousands of streams. Take a listen to this. A little taste of Reza Rohani on piano with Sarah Naini from this month on Instagram, doing that famous Gugush song Geriye Konam Ya Nakonam. Right now, Reza Rohani joins me from Los Angeles, California today. Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. A pleasure to be here.
What a pleasure to have you on the program. How does it feel to be an Instagram sensation, getting hundreds of thousands of views for just sitting in your living room and at a makeshift piano?
Well, yeah, you know what? Getting there wasn't as easy as it sounds, but it definitely is a very rewarding experience. I feel very lucky to be able to share my feelings with an audience so big.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And, and how much do you and Sarah plan what you're going to do? Or has that just been this spontaneous thing you started doing during Corona?
Honestly, the whole process started way back during Stage when I was, sitting in the studio late nights and rendering stuff for the shows. And just to basically gap the time, I just turned on the microphone, and it has not the microphone, the live camera on Instagram.
Yeah.
And it has always been like this. Like, I've been called a human jukebox before, because I was able to more or less reproduce whatever I was familiar with and whatever I heard, I could play on the piano. So I just basically turned on the camera and asked the audience to tell me what they want to hear, and then I would play it. And so that basically continued in a way with solo piano. And then after I was geographically closer to Sarah, and it was possible for us to be online, basically from the same room. So that is what we decided to do, because that also comes naturally to her as well. So this is basically what you can see here on Instagram. It was just basically what would happen regardless if the camera was on or not. So we would just get together and perform. And so, we more or less stumbled upon it. We just went live and played a few requests, and it turned out to be very popular. However, it got way more popular as the pandemic started. Mm-hmm. And then also Instagram offered the option to save the live so that people could watch it afterwards as well.
Right.
That wasn't possible before that. And as that option was offered, it really like tripled our
is there something
audience.
Bittersweet? I mean, you're absolutely right. It takes a lifetime of cultivating what you've cultivated to be good enough to have this fan base that you have. But is there something bittersweet about the fact that an accomplished musician like yourself, who would spend hours, weeks, months recording an album, getting all the sounds exactly perfect, making sure it's exactly the arrangement, the mix you want, can potentially get more hits, get more streams, get more attention, maybe even get more material success, just doing something live with mediocre sound on the little Instagram camera, and get hundreds of thousands of streams?
Well, you know what? Yeah, as you just pointed it out, so I do take pride in cultivating that kind of ability to be able to perform on the spot. But as somebody who does it both, I actually don't see anything bitter in it. So I am very happy to be able to perform live. But also, I also have a lot of recordings where I put months and years, even sometimes, into production, where you go into the studio remixing a piece like for 11 or 12 times.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, I've done it both. So and for me, it's just sweet.
So Reza, you were intimating a moment ago that you're one of those people who, back in my band in the 90s, there was one of the guys in the band who, and I would say he wasn't necessarily the best musician of the four of us, in terms of his actual chops, but he can hear, he's still with us, he can hear something on the radio, a song he's never even heard before, and play it back to you by the time the song is done. You're one of those guys?
Well, yeah, I guess I am kind of. I mean, there are very realistic and bold limits to my abilities, but they are good enough, definitely, for to be able to recreate at least pop music.
Hence the human jukebox.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
I want to get into your story and the different places you've lived and how you've evolved as a musician. But you've said, before we do that, just in terms of defining things, you've said you want to be a composer and pianist without borders. What does that mean to you?
Well, I really do have and do like to have I would say a cultural identity of my own that really displays my personal story and history. And my personal history was not really defined by geographical borders. For example, I remember when I had my first or second performance in Tehran, as a freshly graduated jazz pianist,
when you returned after Germany.
From Germany, yeah. And so I was playing my pieces, and there was this older lady who requested, "Can you play something Iranian for us?" So she said, "Yeah, she's the Irani bezan."
That's the chi.
And then,
What do you want you to play?
Well, yeah, but my reply instantly was that I consider myself Iranian, so whatever I am playing for you, and whatever is my composition is also Iranian. But she had a point, and I did reply, but I did understand her at the same time. So that was a very bold way to say that basically I did not sound purely Iranian any longer. Which was my goal. That's why I left the country at such a young age to be influenced by other cultures as well. And I really don't want this process to ever stop. So I do want to keep my identity and my roots without, this hindering my process of growing.
I love that. You're an explorer.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
we all are.
Some more than others. Take me back to being. You mentioned Iran. So being a kid in the late 70s and 1980s. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know you, and I know a lot of Iranians do, but you come from quite a musical family. Your uncle, Shahdad Rohani, your aunt, Puran, your grandfather, Reza. Of course, there's your dad. When were you first aware, Reza, that you were the son of a famous musician, that you were in this kind of famous family?
I really didn't realize that for a long time that this was something special. Like when I went to school, I was surprised that people had non-famous dads whose names wouldn't open doors. So, I mean, I am extremely lucky to be in that family and to have the privileges, but also the support that comes with it, both from my own family and also from people who are interested in the kind of music that my family is responsible for. So it has always been a blessing, and I am very lucky to realize that pretty early in my life. That I was just surrounded by stars. Like my aunt was a superstar. My dad, thanks to his career, but also to his TV appearances right before the revolution, was also probably the only composer whose face was so well known in the country.
Right.
And I did realize that very early, and I'm very grateful that I did appreciate every second of it.
You mentioned going to school. What would you get treated differently at school? Would kids ask questions about your family, or want you to bring them home to meet your dad?
You know what? Actually, it wasn't so much the kids, but the school staff and their families and the kids' parents and stuff, they definitely did treat me differently. The kids, wouldn't really like. Yeah, I mean, I was a popular kid because I was very into sports and very active, and I was also I was a little bit, I grew very fast, so I was huge in my school. So size really mattered. So I've been the same.
What do you mean you were huge?
Since I was I've been the same height since I was 12. So imagine that. I was a captain of the basketball team. So I am a regular. I am 177. 1 meter 77 centimeters, but for a 12-year-old guy in Tehran back then, I was huge.
Wait a second, you're coming from this famous family. You're a good-looking kid. You're bigger than the other kids. You're the captain of the basketball team. This is a pretty charmed childhood you're explaining here.
Yes, I actually, I loved my entire life so far, and I feel extremely lucky. But so school was pretty much very, very fun. So
I can hear my I can hear my mom listening to this right now saying, "Baba cheshm nazan dige inqadar," you know, things have gone so well. When did you start? When did you actually start playing the piano? When did music become something that was running through your fingers as well as your lineage?
Well, a very interesting question. I actually, I probably started, I mean, there's this self-sustaining cycle where you get praise and you want to preserve that positive feeling, so you exercise and practice more. And then you get better, and then you get praise again, and so on. So I fell into that with the age of 12, I guess. And it was just, I had worked, of course, I started going to classes with, I guess I was probably 6 years old. So I had my father teaching me, then I had my older sister teaching me, then I went to my uncle Ardashir, and they all influenced me, and they were on my side, for starting phase, which is not necessarily easy. So they were it requires a lot of discipline for especially for a young boy who actually is good at sports and wants to be outside all the time.
Right.
So to practice for like 2 hours a day, that was that was really painful for the starting years. And but yeah, I made it through that, and then with the age of 12, I was pretty much in the self-sustaining cycle. So
sorry. When you were a kid, were you playing the piano because you wanted to, or was there kind of a family obligation that this was something that you do if you're part of the Rohanis?
Well, to be honest with you, I do not remember how I felt about it, because like I never got away from the piano long enough to create a craving for it. That was very dominant. But I actually I'm very happy that I got a chance to basically develop this skill and these skills and abilities that early, because as a young child you lack experience to make long-term decisions, and I think parents are responsible to guide you to the best of their knowledge in those years.
But you would know if you really hated it. You would know if it's something that you didn't want to do. And
obviously I did not hate it. Yeah. Otherwise, it would have ended differently.
Well, this is the thing, Reza. I mean, this is part of the Rubik's Cube with you that's so interesting, is that, in my experience interviewing people who are the progeny of very, very famous people, it usually goes one way or the other. In other words, they either follow in the footsteps or they really don't. They run into the absolute opposite direction, right? Many kinds of famous folks tend to shy away from going into the same field or actively decide to carve out their own path. You not only choose music, but piano, which is, what your dad is, the maestro. He's the guy. Did you ever think, what if I don't live up to my dad? What if this is, I'm always going to be in his shadow? Did those things in your early teens, before you leave and go to Germany, did those things enter your mind at all?
Not at all, to be honest. Not at all, because I really am grateful to my father, who basically gave me the necessary self-confidence that you gain through skill. As I told you, so I was basically too young to really choose anything. I actually was more influenced by my friends to choose, like, for example, the kind of sports that they were interested in, like basketball, instead of football or soccer. So which was way more popular back in Iran.
Yes.
than basketball. So, but I was very much influenced by a friend to choose basketball, for example, or to listen to, I don't know, like Pink Floyd, which was, I was way too young to start listening to Pink Floyd, but I did it anyways because this older friend of mine who used to be my role model, who still remains my role model today in many ways. Those things were influenced by friends. But, there is this, starting phase that is not really pleasant at that age where you cannot really create, you don't have the skills to play something that is really interesting because you have to like do the basics and go through the chores of practicing and developing your skill. Those days and those years, I would say, they are not really fun because, even if you practice and you get it right, the music that you're playing is not really something that would move anybody. But as soon as I got good enough to produce results that I could get behind, then I started loving it. And I was at a very early age, so it was like 12. It is, I would say, yeah.
Just parenthetically, Reza, there's almost every week something comes up where I go, I have to make a documentary about that, and definitely on the list is some kind of exploration or documentary about post-revolutionary Gen Xers and millennials in Iran and their connection with Pink Floyd, because I still can't figure out how this, what was in the DNA or which suitcase with cassette tapes of Pink Floyd or whatever made it to Iran. But there's this weird, entire generation who know Pink Floyd, don't know, the hip hop scene, don't know, a lot of the Western stars, don't know a lot of the music that I would have grown up with in London and then in Toronto and New York, but they know Pink Floyd. It's amazing.
Yeah, I honestly cannot explain that to you from a musical point of view. And of course, I would go out on a limb and say that, most people that listen to it would not even at least in a deeper sense, understand the lyrics.
Right.
Yeah, psychedelic rock. I was 12.
Right. And what was their access to the drugs required to really understand
exactly.
it? That's the other question.
Yeah, exactly. So, I honestly cannot answer that because I was not into that, but I still that's what I want to say. So, for example, Pink Floyd was something that I would not be naturally drawn to even today.
And were you drawn to the big Persian pop of the time? Like, were you into, just before your time, that is? I mean, were you into Ebi or Dariush and that stuff at that time?
Not at all. No. We would just we would have like tapes on video that we would watch, and they were mostly pre-revolutionary Rangarang shows with Gugush and other stars, and we would watch that because we did not really have direct access to what was happening culturally anywhere else in the world.
Right.
And even videotapes from Los Angeles would arrive once a year, and you would watch. I was again too young to watch that. I would have preferred to just watch cartoons and stuff. Right. Over and over again, Cinderella and Robin Hood and stuff like that.
The famous Persian stories of Robin Hood and Cinderella. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and also it's so interesting because I recently watched actually Robin Hood in its not censored version, the full version, and it was a totally different story than we used to see in Iran. Because they had
what did they censor in Robin Hood?
Well, I think that was Robin Hood was the fox, and he had a romance with this other lady.
Right. He does have some romances.
That was absolutely yeah. Anyway, so
what's so interesting is though. Sorry, let me bring us back because I could talk all day about Robin Hood and Pink Floyd. What's interesting to me is, again, in terms of the pedigree and where you come from. So. Is this decision then, a couple of years after the 12-year-old Reza, to go to Germany? Because, so your dad is Anushivan Rohani, a famous maestro. I could see it if you were going into any other field, space exploration, sports, dance, even medicine, that you may want to leave Iran and get that coveted education and pedigree from the West that a lot of bourgeois kids in Iran were sent to get. But you had one of the best teachers in Iran, in your family. In fact, you had a few of them in your family. Yes. What was the precipitant for leaving that and going to Germany to get a musical education at the age of 15?
Well, actually, that's a very smart question to ask. And to be honest with you, this is the first time that I am actually thinking about it and verbalizing what went into that decision. But it wasn't my own decision. It was mostly my father. And I was very much, I would say, supportive of that decision. And I was prepared for the hardships that I was about to face. But yeah, the goal was to be better even. The goal was to, having access to better education that my father had, better teachers, better professors, better. Yeah, that was the entire goal. So
I mean, it's quite beautiful, really. But if I can just extend this, because again, it's quite extraordinary to me. If as a metaphor, the Serena Williams, the Williams sisters, a couple of the best tennis players in America. Their dad taught them. Their dad was a tennis player. He wasn't, he wasn't the best tennis player, but it's like the dad who's the coach saying, "Okay, actually go to Europe." Instead of training with me. And in a way, it's quite beautiful that your dad thought that you could gain something more by going something more than what he could give. But, I happen to know, I actually have piano players in Iran in my family who were taught by your dad or by people around your dad. So I know that he was this very coveted teacher, amongst other things, and as members of your family. So you could have had that education incubated within your own family, and you get sent to go somewhere else to do it. It's quite an extra. Maybe it's your dad I should be asking the question of, but what do you suspect he thought you could gain in Germany that he couldn't give you?
Well, I wasn't the first in our family to leave. My father had attempted to, get a scholarship to go study abroad, but he has like a cute story about, how basically the government had like grants for young musicians to go study in Europe, but the grant was specified to flute and not the piano. And so as he went to get the grant, and he has gotten like the approval of a professor in France, in Paris, who would, he was interested into teaching him and tutoring him. And he goes, I don't know if he goes back in Iran or in the embassy, I don't know where. But then, there is like one government official who tells him, there is no grant for the piano. Why don't you switch to flute? then you can, have the money to go study. So he was the very first. Basically, he had already, aimed this high for himself. And I firmly believe that is why he, was able to eventually, get where he is by aiming that high. And then, he did that same thing together with my grandfather, of course, and my uncles. So he did that for all my three uncles as well. And I'm not saying that, my father basically had a fatherly figure for my uncles. I don't want to go into that discussion. But, I'm just saying that, this kind of understanding was within our family, that all three of my uncles, they went to Austria in Vienna and studied music as well. Ardeshir, Shahdad, Shahriyar, all three studied in Vienna as well. And so I was the first basically to go abroad after the revolution, from the new generation.
Which, by the way, is a whole other story. So what's it like to be, when you get to Germany, you're 15 years old, what's it like to be an Iranian kid in Germany as a teenager in the early 1990s?
Well, honestly, like that was quite miserable because, as I just told you, I was very popular. I had I had an amazing life in Tehran, and I was loved by my friends and by my family. And I went to Germany with the age of 15, and a very good friend of my father, who I'm in debt forever, Professor Sami, the famous neurosurgeon, and his wife, they had accepted me into their home. So I went from being the popular kid in Tehran to Germany in '92, which was, it wasn't in the city of Hanover, but it wasn't even in the city. It was like in the suburbs of Hanover.
Wow,
and so where, for back then, everything closed at 6:30, like even the suburbs, but even the city, everything
and
was
how was
dead
your how
at
was your
6:30.
German?
And I did not speak a word of German.
Right.
I did not speak German at all. And it was quite miserable. But, I was aware of it before I went there. And I knew that I have to face this hardship. So it wasn't for me like, I did not imagine that I would go somewhere where I would have fun, or, this notion like berim kharaj, like I didn't feel like it's
spring break.
Yeah, exactly. So I knew that I have to.
But I'll bet I'm betting in retrospect that you look at it now, and even that transformation from the popular kid who has a community around him, his friends, his family, etc., in Tehran, the captain of the basketball team, to a rather solitary, lonely experience in Germany, not speaking the language. I'll bet in retrospect that was a learning experience, right?
Yes. I grew a lot personally, and it was it was definitely something that made me, I think, a better person. And I also it was like around 8 months where I was in Hanover, and I was learning German, where I was very lonely, and I had nobody in my age group to basically talk to. And I was also basically cut off from my friends in Tehran. Back in the day, there was, it would be extremely expensive to call home.
There's no Facebook. Yeah.
No Facebook. And I had to write, actual mail, and it would take 2 weeks to arrive in Tehran. And then my friends would reply, and it would take another 2 weeks to get back to me. So basically, it was a different world back then. But after 10 months, I went to Bavaria, which is in the southern Germany region, and I went to a boarding school with everybody my own age, and then my life was happy again. And then Germany grew on me very, very fast, and it became my second home.
You end up staying in Germany for as long as you had been in Iran. I mean, you're there for about 15 years. Tell me if I have this story correct. You basically end up going there, at least in the musical sense, to pursue a classical genre of music, to pursue a classical music degree, but you end up gravitating as well towards jazz. Is that correct? Yeah. What was it about jazz that captivated you?
Well, mostly harmonies. So I basically always had this calling in myself that I was always very bold, and I knew it very early in my life that I wanted to be a composer. I never wanted to be a pianist, or at least a pianist only. Piano was my main instrument, and I loved playing it, and I still do. I feel sick if I don't play for one day. I feel like there's something missing, but I always wanted to be a composer, and I felt at that point, and I think I was correct, that classical music would not give me, at least studying classical piano would not give me what I need as a composer. So it was a very natural development for me to.
Sorry, why not? Because it's already got its traditions, it's already got its templates, or is that what you mean? What?
Well, no, to be a classical pianist does not train you to go knowingly into these, amazing world of harmonies that jazz offers.
You can't be the explorer. That again, back to the Reza as the explorer.
Well, yeah, but that is true. But let me be more specific. So in order to as a classical piano player, in order to get into really interesting harmonies, you have to start with Rachmaninoff, which is already probably one of the hardest things you could ever play on the classical piano. Whereas in jazz music, even at the starting point, you have access to such interesting harmonies. I'm comparing that to Mozart or Beethoven, who are great composers. But back then it's the harmonies started, quite harmless and easy, and it rarely got as interesting as it gets early on in jazz music.
So just to explain this to a non-musical audience, if anybody's listening who are not quite as accomplished in music. So you're talking about in traditional classical music, there'll be a strong melody. In jazz, there's more opportunities to build around that melody using different notes. Would that be a way to describe the harmony opportunities?
Yeah. Roughly, yes.
Perhaps you could do a better job of explaining it.
For non-musicians.
Yes, I'm trying to. What does it mean to? Some people might not know what it means that there's more harmony opportunities. So I wanted to.
You know what? Yeah. So basically, if you have a single layer in music, it's called melody, and as soon as it gets to 2 layers, you have they have to develop a relationship together. So it will be a harmony.
Okay, perfect.
But in classical music, you have usually harmonies that are 3 layered together with the melody, and in jazz music, you have harmonies that are 4, 5, or 6 layered together with the melody. So that was my point for non-musicians.
So Reza, you by your 20s, you're in Germany. You're playing, from what I understand, you're doing some gigs in jazz clubs. You're basically a kid of the diaspora. You're now you're German Iranian, Reza Rohani. What leads you to go back to Iran and make your first album there?
Well, yeah, it was very personal. I basically simply fell in love.
Oh,
and that's why I moved back to Iran, and and then living in Iran.
Wait,
because of
hang on.
Emotional
you fell in love with this is not a metaphor. You actually with a person, right?
Yes.
And she was in Iran.
She was in Iran.
She was in Iran, and you were communicating, and then she said, "Well, I'm here."
No. I used to go back during summer breaks.
Okay.
For a few weeks in Iran, and one of these summer breaks, I fell in love, and then after I came back, we stayed in touch, and then I decided that
enough Germany.
I want to be close. Exactly.
Yeah.
Enough of Germany, and then I have been emotional this way in my life, and I'm happy that I was. I hope I am going to, find the strength again to be this courageous. But I've done this a few times. So.
Hey, it's a beautiful thing. You pursued love. Yeah, you're an artist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you definitely gain something, and it is also a risky move. I mean, you have to rebuild every time you migrate to a different country. And I've done it a few times.
What was it like? What was it? I mean, you said you've been returning at summers and stuff, but when you moved back to Iran, the Iran of 2007 or 2000, mid 2000s is different from the Iran of 1991 that you've left to a certain extent. What was that like for you? Did you feel immediately like you're back in Iran, or did you feel now you're somebody from away who's come back? You're Westernized Reza somehow.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah. So the country had changed, but I got the chance to witness that change because I was lucky to go back home a few times during those years that I was in Germany. So the country had changed, but moving back and starting the process of being a professional musician in Iran was a culture shock for me, definitely. It was hard to adjust, and my personality was not. My professional and maybe even private personality was shaped by German values such as punctuality and stuff that
We definitely don't know that in the Iranian
exactly,
culture.
yeah. So so what I was used to from Germany was, of course, not provided in Iran, and
not only that, but a sophisticated music industry which didn't exist when you go back to Iran. Right?
Yes, that was the case. Although I was fortunate enough to find accomplished musicians to work with, but so the industry was actually starting quite strong, and people were actually like pop singers were emerging, and they were also making real money. And in many ways, those were really good years for Iranian musicians. I don't know if they were good years for Iranian music, but they probably were. But, I very soon realized that I cannot stay true to myself and also be successful the way I wish in Iran. Although, I actually kept on going and tried to stay true to myself with a reasonable amount of healthy flexibility. But I realized that I cannot be, the way that, as successful as I wish I could be. But then I decided to just, go with it anyway. And I realized that being successful is not more important than staying true to yourself.
Let me first of all, by the way, what happened to the Rabete with how long did it last? The girl that you followed back to Iran.
It lasted a few years.
Oh, okay, all right. So it wasn't that's not bad. Yeah. So it was worth it. It wasn't. It didn't end as soon as you got there or something.
No. It did end eventually.
All great things seem to end sometimes. Yeah. So you mentioned a few moments ago that you did find some great musical compatriots once you get back to Iran. In fact, you build this new group called the Beyond the Moon Ensemble, and you end up putting out that first album that I mentioned in the introduction called A Fragile Silence. Let me play a little bit of Shab Abi. This is from Reza Rohani and the Beyond the Moon Ensemble from 2008. From 2008, a little taste of Reza Rohani, my featured guest today, with his Beyond the Moon Ensemble and a song called Shab Abi. We talked a bit about this at the top of the interview, but how many people of Iranian background in Iran were making music like that 12 years ago?
Well, I honestly don't know. We did feel like pioneers in our band, but not in a life-changing way. But it was interesting to explore those areas with kamanche and that kind of music that I wrote that featured it. But yeah, so I mean, I'm sure that there were, I mean, very, very, very good, high quality music followed us at least. But back then, I think I was pretty new. I'm not sure.
How was it received in Iran, that album?
You know what? It actually was well received compared to being just an instrumental album with no famous face on it. We were just four young guys that practiced every week together and had a working band like that and performed a few times a year. A few nights a year in Tehran only, and. But it was well received. I mean, interestingly enough, it was played quite often on the radio and on the national TV without mentioning our name or giving any credit to it. But yeah. So,
oh, really? It was played?
Yeah.
It made the cut?
Yeah. Well, yeah, quite often, and still is actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it was.
I can never. By the way, I mean, I'm sure this is partly because I've always been outside of Iran, but I can never figure out what is allowed and not allowed. The process of censorship is so bizarre and random to me. I would have thought this might fall into the category of heretical somehow. I don't. What do I know?
Interesting that you mentioned heretics. Actually, the first song, "Fragile Silence," was again without my permission. It was the title music of Musabaqe Quran.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
On TV, it was like
it was more than just accepted. It was.
So Ostad Motahari as to miporsad. That was like basically the title music of it. Interestingly enough, but yeah, it was also used for like commercials on TV. And so basically the music was.
So wait a second. When that
well
gets
received,
played on a show about the Quran, a religious program, what do you have any recourse? Can you? I mean, it's like Elton John's music getting played at the Trump rally. Do Elton John calls up and says, "No, you can't play it"? I mean, do you say anything, or do you?
Because there are many parallel institutions in Iran that have to that do the same thing more or less. For example, there is this basically institute that gives permissions for airing stuff on TV, and there is a different kind of shura or institution that gives permission for having your CD pressed out for sales and stuff like that for publishing. So I had to basically go through these different kind of chores to get different permissions for different kind of media, and one of those was going to this council that would decide on if the music is playable on TV, and TV and radio was both the same thing. So Seda wa Sima, which is like both radio and TV, and yeah, it was denied permission, but then. It was after that. It was like made the title music for this Quran program, and then also many other times. I would say like at least 10 other things that come to mind, like commercials and other stuff. But it was without giving us any credit. So it was just basically denied there, but then used. But then without names.
And so you have little recourse. You couldn't.
Yeah, I don't, because back then, I had left Iran already as those things happened, and friends told me afterwards.
Wow.
So, but yeah, so
So
it's okay.
You do decide to move to America right after that, around 2009. You alluded to it again. You said you really didn't feel like you could stretch out or do what you wanted to do musically and business-wise and musically without leaving. Tell me why you chose California.
Well, California is such a natural choice if you move to the U.S. as a musician. And also, growing up in Germany, I've had my share of bad weather. So I really was like, being a teenager in Germany watching Baywatch.
Right.
I imagined to go to California. Then I made the mistake to basically move to San Francisco first, which was quite
Back to the
opposite
rain
of
and
good
the
weather.
yeah.
But then, my father had very close friends and actually an entire community supporting him. When he came to the U.S., he would visit the U.S. quite often to work. He would go to Sacramento, and there was this, strong community and friendships there. And I just followed him. Basically, the first time I came to the U.S., it was just to perform in concerts alongside with my father. But then after that, I actually decided to stay. Interestingly enough, I actually was in the U.S. as my sister called me and said that, mail has arrived at home, and it says that I won in the green card lottery. So I actually had participated through a friend for the first time in the green card lottery, and I basically had won. So it was, just basically the signs were there. Okay. I was in the U.S. with my German passport, but then, I wanted to stay here, but then it would have been, going through the same ordeal again of, applying for a new visa and permission to stay and work and stuff like that. But then, winning the green card lottery, that was just basically a sign for me to.
So Reza, I in the introduction, I called you. I mean, I haven't talked to you about this, so I don't know what you. I called you Iranian, German, American, Reza Rohani. You said earlier in this conversation that your cultural identity is to not really belong anywhere. So how do you identify? I mean, if you were in some part of the world, if you're in Sydney, Australia, and somebody walks up to you and says, "Where are you from?" How do you answer that question?
Well, it's always a hard thing to answer for me. I actually usually answer as an Iranian. And I don't use like other terminologies like Persian or stuff like that, because I don't want to really hide that I am an Iranian or Iranian, the way I pronounce it. But so I don't really feel like I 100% belong to a certain geographic coordination here on Earth. I do feel very affectionate about Germany. I experienced like very important personal growth there, and I've been calling the U.S. home since 2009, and it has been 11 years now, and I feel very much at home. And of course, there is Tehran and Iran, and where I always felt at home. So basically that you gain something, you lose something.
Let me ask you about your dad, because we talked a little bit about him, but I'd be remiss if I didn't go a little deeper on this, because it's interesting. Not only did you go into the same reshte, you're the same, music career and the piano, and there you are. I mean, we at the top of this interview, we played a little bit of you guys playing piano together, in fact, on stage. It's not just that you don't shy away from being a proud son. Reza, at least 50% of your Instagram is pictures or videos with you and your dad. You highlight him at every turn. You're very proud of him. Yeah. You are not someone who feels like he's in the shadow of his father. You seem to be screaming at the rooftops. This is my dad, and I'm proud of him. Tell me about your relationship with him and what you've most learned from him.
I do feel very proud to be his son, mainly because, he is the definition of a good person, if you ask me, and at least many of his friends. And, I really want to one day be able to achieve nearly as much professionally as my father has, but then I also, this is like one of my deepest wishes in my life, that I one day get to be as good a father as my father was to me. So so I admire him in every way, and I also, again, through his own instructions and also through his help of getting me the education that I need, I do feel that professionally I complement his abilities with my own. So
how do you complement his abilities?
Well, yeah, so basically to get musical again, so he is very strong with melodies, and my strength is harmonies. So since we explained
I'm not going to get you to describe it again. Yeah. Do you guys consult with each other professionally? I mean, do you say, hey, Dad, do you think I should take this gig? Or does he say, here's a recording, what do you think of it? Do you talk to each other that way?
Yeah, constantly. Like every single step, yeah, I do consult with him. And I'm very, very lucky to report that he also does consult with me. At least, in the last few years.
Are you tarofi with each other? Would he tell you if he thinks something isn't good?
Actually, I am one of the very, very few people who he does tell if he doesn't like something, because there is this famous story about him that there was an earthquake in Los Angeles. And then this friend of my mom calls him, nervous. It was, I think, in the 80s. It was a bad earthquake here in LA, and he was here in LA. And this friend of my mom calls him, says, like, Anushun, are you okay? Is everything good? And he says, that it was a great earthquake. And then, this has become this anecdote about what can be good about this earthquake. But yeah, so he basically sees everything positive, and he definitely does not give negative comments, except to me, which right. Which I very much appreciate, because I learned that giving his honest professional opinion.
Yeah.
is the most valuable thing he can offer. And I feel very honored that he's honest to me and helps me improve. That is.
Can you bring yourself to be critical with him? Would you say?
Oh, I am constantly critical of everybody. So.
Okay. So you would say, Dad, I think you shouldn't have done that concert or that appearance, or you hit the wrong note, or I don't like your hair, or what? I mean, which.
Well, yeah, I do it constantly, and it's funny that I do, because my sisters as well. So my two sisters and I, we constantly criticize him, but lovingly, in order to basically, we are very sensitive of preserving his image, because that is one of the most valuable things in our lives. He's very good in getting critiqued. He has a big personality, and he can take those. And again, but dishing out, I'm the only recipient. Every once in a while,
you have the honor of being the one where the positivity stops and the negativity.
Well, yeah. I mean, I see it very positive. That is where the honesty. The honesty about details. I mean, he's not necessarily dishonest when he says positive things. He is actually honest, but he does not point out the negative in other people's works or lives or whatever. But when it comes to my work, especially, he is very critical, and I that is the most constructive thing that can happen to me. I very much appreciate it.
Listen, I have to ask you about something that's very important to me, and it does relate to you and your dad, and it even relates to the story you just told a few minutes ago about your music being played on Iranian TV and radio and without any consultation with you or agreement, or I'm assuming any compensation either. We've been talking on this program a lot, Reza, about the broken nature of copyright, royalties, and publishing when it comes to famous Persian, Iranian compositions and writing. This is something that I really hope to try and do something about in whatever little way I can. We had Farid Zolan on this program for a full episode not too long ago. I'm sure you know him, if not know of him. And it is, of course, heartbreaking that this legend of composition has not been compensated anywhere near what he deserves for writing all those legendary popular songs. And I was thinking about you, and I was thinking about your father, who I imagine falls into this category as well. I mean, I know, and I know a lot of people know, that your dad literally wrote the Persian version of Happy Birthday.
Yes.
There's not one Iranian around the world who doesn't know that song, that melody. Tabalo, tabalo. Does he get compensated for that?
Well, luckily, my dad registered with it's called Sasem. It's the company that
the Iranian version of ASCAP, like a publishing.
Not the Iranian, the French version. Of ASCAP,
okay.
Protects the composer's rights. So
why was that song written in France? Or no? Or
no.
Okay.
He basically, remember the story I told about him going to Paris and trying to, study there. So
yes.
He basically also, through my mom, who also spent some years in Paris to study. He had physical access to being in France back then and registering with ASCAP.
Okay.
Oh wow! So can you hear this sound? I think I need to give me a second to close my windows.
Okay.
Shut. Give me 1 second. Sorry.
Reza has gone to close his windows. Panjere Ha, also a famous song from Saudi. Wasn't Panjere Ha a famous song? Wasn't that a...
Do Panjere.
Oh, Do Panjere?
Kukush,
Oh. Wow, it's quite what's happening out there.
Oh wow! Stop.
How many windows does he have?
So how about this for a podcast? Like,
What was that? First of all,
slower.
how many windows do you have? It sounded like you were closing at 10 windows.
No, it was just one window was stuck, so I had to use a little bit of force.
That wasn't the publishing authorities, was it? As soon as we started the conversation, they were at the window with some kind of contraption.
Yeah. So my father had access to physically be in France and personally registering for membership in SACEM, which is the French ASCAP, in the 60s. So he basically has been registering all of his songs ever since.
Wow.
And so luckily enough, at least here in the Western world, his work is protected.
But when that song gets played in Iran,
does
he make a penny? Yeah.
No.
So there's 190 million people currently in Iran where that's who will at least once a year sing that song or play the music in their house. Right?
I don't. Are we this many? Are we 90 million
people?
Yeah.
I don't know, 80 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. People sing that around the world. All who speak Farsi basically sing that mostly. I mean, he does not get compensated when that song is used in any media in Iran, but at least he's protected in the rest of the world, which is kind of funny.
So as a composer yourself, do you have How do you feel about it? It's not just music too. I mean, we had Shahnoosh Parsipour on the show. She's a novelist who, Farid Zolam was talking about Iraj Pezeshkzad, who wrote the Daijun Napoleon, has made nothing from a story that every Iranian knows. He'd be like the J.K. Rowling. It's like writing Harry Potter, who's a billionaire. What do you make of this boondoggle that is the lack of compensation or royalties for creators who've come from Iran over the last few decades?
Well, yeah, it's very unfortunate, and it definitely does affect the quality of all cultural products that are not protected and are not compensated. But yeah, it's a reality that unfortunately is true for so many other fields as well, when it comes to Iran and Iranian industries, that it needs correction.
Yeah. Reza, you chose to participate in the Manoto series stage as a judge. In fact, it's probably one of the reasons why you've become even more famous in the last few years, because of your appearance there. Some artists have trepidation about appearing on reality shows. We did have Hamed Nikpeh on a few months ago, and he says he's not sure he would have done that in retrospect, just because he didn't feel like it fit with him as an artist. How was that experience for you?
Well, for me, it was a great experience, honestly. Like, it was like a fairy tale, and it got me a lot of recognition, and it was a fun show to produce. It was very challenging to produce that many tracks, backing tracks for the vocalists in such a short time. And it was such a privilege to be able to see almost instantly how your work reflects within such a big audience of like 30 and over million people who would watch the show. And then also getting for the final show, I think we had like over 6 million votes, which was amazing. So it was a fairy tale, and it was hard, but in a very good way. Like, I didn't get much sleep during the live shows, because we would just work so hard to produce. I mean, the shows themselves, they were like, basically they felt like our day off, because everything was catered to us, and we were just a talent sitting there and being filmed, and everybody else was producing. But the 5 days where what we had until the next live show, we had to just basically work around the clock to finish those tracks for the singers.
What about the spectacle of it? Do you like being famous?
Very much so. I love being famous. I don't know if I'm that famous, but I love being able to being privileged to have a platform to represent my art. And that is all about. That is why I went into art in the first place, in order to be able to communicate to as many people as possible.
I think one of the tension points for Hamed, not to paraphrase or to paraphrase him, I suppose, it would be that and he's not the first to say this. I mean, this is the whole difficulty that some folks feel when they go on a big program like this. Is that he said, well, I've been an artist for all these years. I've created all this stuff. People know me now for a TV show. They don't know me for my art, Does that bother you if people just know you from the Manoto show?
No. Why wouldn't bother me? No, it's just, I just see that my art would not have reached as many people as it did without that show. Is it exactly the same amount as people who know me through the TV show? No, of course not. Many people know me through the show who did not, listen to my music at all. But first of all, I got to produce those tracks that were basically the backing tracks for the vocalists, and that was basically the most important display that I got. So I got to see how those arrangements work and how people like them or dislike them. But other than that, I at least got like 10 times the audience that I could ever wish for without that show. So yeah, it was a positive experience for me through and through.
You know,
so, yeah.
You know what I felt, what I've learned in this interview, a number of things, but one of the things is, unless you're an incredibly good actor who's been faking us this whole time, you do sound like the way you describe your dad. You sound like a pretty positive guy. Most of the things that I've sort of thrown at you in terms of potential tensions in your life or your past or whatever, you see them, or you talk about them in positive ways. You can see the positive in things, and you want to talk about that. Would that be true of you?
Well, I am nothing like my dad, unfortunately. He is like, he would be not described like a normal human being. I'm very much a normal human being who is very appreciative and grateful of and aware of how lucky he has been in his life. And yeah, that is me. I am very grateful. I would say my name Reza does reflect that, so I am very razi.
When you become much more famous, you also become the subject of a lot of gossip. Your romantic life gets discussed by the internet very often. Even actually booking you on this our program, there were people who were on our team who were like debating whether is he still with this person? I think he's dating this person. He's how do you feel about that?
Oh, well, honestly, like I usually keep my private life very private, which nobody believes me because, I went public once, like really, really public. And
what are you talking about, Reza?
I am talking about my previous relationship that everybody gossips about.
Yes.
But yeah, so there are also like, I mean, It was one of the great things that happened to me in life, and the only thing is that we both probably would have chosen not to go public with it if we had a second chance, because private life is called a private life for a reason. It's better to be kept private. But yeah, other than that,
how do you deal with gossip on the internet in general, or trolls or whatever?
I don't really care that much, unless there's somebody who is like really interested in things I would like to offer or would like to share. If they are interested in things that I don't like to share or I don't like to comment about, then most of the time it's just doesn't bother me. Yeah.
Hey man, I've really enjoyed this. I am so grateful for the time you've given us. It's a very positive story, your story, and I appreciate what you do. I want to go out on a song that was released not too long ago with your dad and Humayun Shajarian. You arranged it. It's called Sarnavesht. But before I ask you about the song, Reza, I know you must have been deeply saddened by the passing of Ustad Muhammad Reza Shajarian, Humayun's dad and a music legend in Iran. Do you want to share any words about Maestro Shajarian?
Well, yeah, indeed, it was a very sad occasion. Obviously, as an artist, of course, you look up to the legends and icons, but I was unfortunately saddened on a very personal level, because Ustad Shajarian used to be one of the closest friends of my dad's, and I don't know if I am in a position to say anything about him, but definitely the thing that I learned from him is that with true greatness, you can have the luxury of being really humble, which he really was. You know, very, very sweet man, great man, of course, in every way. And yeah, he will be missed.
That's beautifully said. So with that said, what do you want to tell us about this song that you arranged with your dad and Humayun?
This is basically like has been in the making for 10 years already, and so my father composed this song, and he basically had the main thing, the main lyrics or the main theme, which was سرنوشت رو باید از سر نوشت, which means you have to be the writer of your own destiny. And so he basically composed that, and Humayun Shajarian, who is probably the greatest singer alive, he's amazing. What he's capable of doing is non-human. So he sang it years ago, and yeah, it just basically. It was like in the background, and my father kept talking about it, how to arrange it and stuff like that, until very recently, like about a year ago, where I got the privilege of getting the official contract of arranging this song, and I put my everything into it. And this is probably the arrangement that I'm most proud of, which is the result of many years, also result of practicing it quite often during stage that you just mentioned. So, and I was able to produce the final track, which I'm very proud of. And yeah, that is the story of that. So it got published after years and years of work, basically.
You should be proud of it. It's beautiful. Yeah. It's great work. It's been a great privilege, and I hope we'll do it again. I hope we'll do it in person once this COVID thing is done, and I'm grateful and happy to get to talk to you, Reza Jan.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Khuda.
That is composer, producer, pianist Reza Rohani. You can find him on Instagram at Reza Rohani Official. Reza Rohani Official. Reza joined us from Los Angeles, California today. What a smooth and positive conversation that was. I quite enjoyed that. Captain Reza, Groovy Shaya, the fabulous Keon have reconvened in and around the Roqe studio. Shaya?
Yes.
Your thoughts on Reza Rohani?
I love this guy. He's a bomb of positive vibes,
Yeah.
And it's like you can tell him your negative thought and he can transform it into positive vibes.
It didn't sound manufactured either. The positivity when he said, I loved being on the TV show. Yes. Lots more people know me now. I am a celebrity.
He's too honest.
It's great. And he was saying that that's the best quality about his dad, but he seems to really be embodying it as well.
Yes.
You know what I liked about him though, when he was talking about picking up German etiquettes and then going back to Iran, that punctuality and stuff like that, and just things that don't fly necessarily in that culture. So
it was
cool.
very interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, the Pink Floyd references are. I'll never stop asking people about Pink Floyd whenever that comes up in an interview. The weird Persian connection with Pink Floyd that I'm going to write a book about. Keon?
It's always interesting to hear the perspective of the child of someone famous and well known. You know, I think you mentioned it. It goes either way. Either they want to distance themselves from that industry and what their father or mother was a part of, or they're engaged in it and they want to learn from their father. And I think Shaya probably relates a lot to that. You know, you're the son of a famous Iranian actor, so it's interesting to hear.
Don't mention that. She gets really
I think I was
sensitive. Shaya Jan. Okay. Azizam. Khobi.
Yes.
So I don't know if you're willing to answer this, but I'm interested to hear your perspective. You know, you're the son of a well-known Persian actor. So
yes,
what do you...
but my dad actually is not that famous as Anushiravan Rohani. But for example, I remember when I was at grade 5th, I think my father had a role in a very famous movie at that time, and so I remember that some of my I passed some of my exams because of my father. You know, yes, but sometimes it's funny. Yeah.
I also thought that was fascinating. That, I mean, as I pointed out in the interview, and it was interesting that he said he hasn't been asked this before, but that paradox or the interesting moment there where this famous maestro, piano player, and also teacher, instructor in Iran, sends his kid to Germany. I thought rather than teach him himself. I think that was very interesting. At the age of 15, okay, you go. And,
actually, I have an English question.
Yes.
Because I've heard it several times. What does it mean when somebody says, for example, "Hey, dude, I'm a musician. I'm not a jukebox," or "I'm a jukebox"? What's the expression of jukebox?
Well, do you know what a jukebox is?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a reference to somebody playing cover songs. So, you know, in at least in Western music, there's guys who play, or people I should say, who the kind of musician who will make a living playing in a bar or playing at weddings or playing at events, doing cover songs, doing songs where, okay, now I'm going to sing a Bruce Springsteen song, now I'm going to sing a Shajarian song, you know what, and whereas not usually the same person does the Springsteen and the Shajarian, but you know, somebody with quite a repertoire. There are some musicians or some artists who don't see themselves as a cover musician, as somebody who's going to sing other people's works, see themselves as their own, their own creators, and so they're not jukebox music. I'm not somebody who's here to play Neil Young songs for you, man. I'm going to just play my songs for you.
That's got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Their origin.
By the way, Keon,
yes.
Did you notice that Shaya has had his hair cut?
I noticed something looked different, and I knew it had something to do with his hair. I was like, okay, either he styled it differently or cut it.
The reason I ask is because I know you didn't notice it, because
did not.
he came in to adjust the microphone right before we started, and you said, there's something different. He looks radically different. He had long hair, and now it's super short hair. And again, it's like a month ago or so when you were like, "Oh, is Reza tall?" Like, Reza is tall, and you'd been working with him for 5 months, and you've never noticed that.
Yes, it could be offensive.
I don't think you notice us. We're all invisible to you.
I think I was meant to be a man. God made the mistake and made me a woman. I don't
what does that
notice
imply?
haircuts.
Men can notice haircuts.
Because
We all notice his haircut.
Men, women, dogs, everyone notices
there's
things.
that joke where a guy doesn't notice his wife's haircut. I think that's me. I'm sorry. It looks great, Shaya. It looks really good. It suits you.
That means a lot.
Look at that letter of the day. Let's see.
All right. It's time for letters.
Okay, so last week on episode 53, we had a feature interview with Jane Lewison. She's the director of the Golha Project. She spoke about her multi-year mission to preserve Persian culture, music, poetry, and art from the 20th century. So on Facebook, we have Nazila Rafizadeh. She wrote, "As someone who loves art, I bow down to Jane Lewison and thank the Museum of London for preserving Iran's cultural heritage. I also thank Jane for trying to preserve Iranian music. And a big thanks to the Roqe team for trying to speak Farsi. Well done, Kianjan and Jian."
This is about trying to speak Farsi.
I mean, I think she meant that towards me. I was trying
لهجه
to.
خیلی عالی دارم.
Oh وای گوشم درد میکنه.
امیدوار هستم که دماغتون چاق باشه.
Oh, and then we have Mujgan Bigdelo on Facebook. She wrote, listening to the interview with Jane took me back to my childhood and my dad's favorite music. I think for a generation like my dad's, Gulha music is the only souvenir that takes them back to the good old days, before the revolution. Gulha Collections is a treasure. Thanks to all the people who were involved in making it and preserving it. Thank you, Roqe team.
And let me just say here again, thank you, Mujgan. And let me just say again that if, first of all, if you didn't hear that interview, it's available on all of our platforms. The last show there with Jane Lewison and Tina Parseman. But also the Golha project, very worth checking out. If you're Googling and you want to see something interesting, all of this heritage, the archives of this radio show that ran for a couple of decades or more in Iran is what Jane has made it her life's mission to collect. Well worth checking out. The Golha project and the child of that, the new version of that, which is the Golistan project, which she's expanded. So worth checking out.
Definitely. So moving on to Instagram, so the next letter I'm about to read, it relates to this. Last week we were talking about the Persian translations of certain words to specific brands. Like the word sponge, for example, translates to a scotch in Persian, like Scotch, the brand.
Right.
So we have Marzieh Hadeh. She wrote, this interview evoked beautiful memories.
Actually, I think we've had this problem before. I don't know.
You don't know
Hadi.
Hadi. I'm sorry, Marzieh Hadi, let's say.
But it's a EI.
EI.
So I would think it's Hadei.
Hadei. Yeah. Hadi.
It wouldn't be Hadie.
Yeah, you might be right, Jian.
Marzieh Hadei.
Yeah.
You're right.
Marzieh Hadei. Khub, she wrote, this interview evoked beautiful memories of my beloved parents. She goes on saying, by the way, Jian, we have a term as coinage in linguistics, which is when trade names for commercial products become general terms. Example, nylon. I thought you might find it interesting.
I do find that interesting. Thank you, Marzieh. Actually, Ponta the artist was developing a list of... Can you call her?
Yeah, Ponta. Can you come here?
She was developing a list of Persian names that... hey, can you hear us? There.
Yes.
Weren't you developing a list of names of Persian objects, Persian things that are named after name brands?
I don't know exactly which ones you mentioned last week.
We mentioned a Scotch,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So what?
Parisian.
What?
Parisian.
Parisian.
Yes.
What's that?
Jurab shishe-i. It's like
Stocking.
Stocking are called Parisians.
Women's stocking, they call them.
yes. The first brand comes from Paris, and then they knew this Jurab like Parisian.
Right. That's the Parisian for name for socks.
Yes.
Okay.
It was by myself, not in the list.
Okay.
So.
Is the list going to get better than this, Ponta the artist? Ponta, this is.
Oh no! Wait.
Ponta the artist, can you?
It gets better.
All right. Is there?
Lee.
This is a-
Lee.
Oh, yeah.
Lee. Yes.
Ah, Lee. What? They call
Lee.
jeans Lee?
Yes.
Yeah.
We call all jeans Lee.
That I know. I've heard
Wow.
Shalvarli.
this. Sharvali. Yeah.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Sharvali Pushidi.
So if you're wearing Guess jeans, you still call them Lee?
Yeah.
Yes.
Still wearing
That's the
Shalvarli.
best.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. Thank you very much, Ponta the artist. By the way, you were hovering around. Did you listen to the Reza Rohani interview?
Yes.
And what did you think?
It was great. He was 100% smooth and rock.
He was rock, yeah.
Yeah, خیلی rock بود.
Yeah.
And I feel not مثلا که مثلا رضا روحانی یه کسیه که خیلی پوزیشن بالایی داره. I feel yeah.
You thought that even though he's a star, he seemed
Yeah.
very down to earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Ponta the artist.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming in. Now give the mic back to Shaya.
Okay. I have more from my list. list.
Yeah, we'll get to the list later. Thank you. Created a monster. All right. All right, thank you.
Oh, where were we? All right, so.
It's like a-
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Shia. Thank you for ceding your microphone onto the artist. Okay, fabulous Keon. Where were you?
Yes, where was I? Yes, moving on. As well, on episode 53, we had Iranian New Zealander psychologist Tina Parsamand on her decision to return to Tehran to help those in need of mental health, counseling, and her popular Instagram channel, Insight with Tina Parsa. So a few people wrote on that specific part of the episode. On Instagram, we have Zahra Fatahi. She wrote, I've just come across this episode and wow, I don't know what to say. This podcast was fantastic. Yeah.
Is that a letter of the day?
I'm not done reading it.
Right.
I thought it was just going to be a biography, but wow. I'm very proud of you, Tina Jean. Stay strong. You can clap now.
Letter of the day.
No, not quite.
That's not the letter of the day? That's so good.
I know. It was
Thank you, Zahra.
Khub. Also last week on the Tina Parsamand episode, we talked about how she was bullied during her elementary school days in New Zealand, and on one specific occasion because she made the grave mistake of taking ghormeh sabzi to school for lunch. Many of us have made this mistake, myself included. It's tragic. Khub, we have a Nastaran Bluri. She wrote, taking ghormeh sabzi to school is not a good idea.
So wait a second. I'm guessing because it's a little stinky. Like,
oh my, it's delicious.
It's the best. But why not take it to school?
It smells and looks like things that don't belong on plates. And by the way, ghormeh sabzi, I'd never realized this, but if you eat it, the smell stays within your body for a week.
Yeah.
And someone brought this to my attention one day at the gym of all places.
Well, or maybe on your drive-in date.
Perhaps, yes. After a week of consuming ghormeh sabzi. So
It's a smell of shambalile.
Yeah, it is.
Sabzi.
So consume it with your own
Shambalile.
discretion. It's
Fenugreek
delicious.
herb.
The what? The fenugreek.
Fenugreek, yes, it's fenugreek, yeah. Delicious, but yes.
You know, there's a slang in Farsi that says "Kalash bu ghormeh sabzi mide."
Yes.
Is that meaning
His head
in a
smells
bad
like
way
ghormeh
or?
sabzi. No, well, sort of. I guess it means he's
Doesn't sound good.
No,
he's a
it-
hot-headed person. I guess.
Oh,
also, right?
exactly.
Khub, moving on, we have Syed Hassan Mir Hosseini wrote, inspiring. I hope your mother gets to a normal life soon, Tina. The best part of the interview, I think, was the comparison of people in Iran and New Zealand.
She mentioned that Tina was on her way to visit with her mother who's dealing with breast cancer.
yeah.
So same message we want to send to Tina and her mom, wishing the best.
Yeah. Khub, and then we have Jamile Diltalab. She wrote, Tina, you're the best. So happy to know you, and I have to admit, I've learned a lot from you.
There you
As
go.
did I. Khub, and then moving on, we have just general letters from no specific episode in particular. We have Farnaz, last name listed as S. She wrote, love listening to this podcast and loved finding Jian again. Can I finish?
Sorry. It's already the letter of the day.
Whom I've missed for a long time. I was a huge fan of the talk show Q in Toronto. He was greatly missed among many of his fans. I'm following you again, Jian.
Thank you, Farnaz. You have the letter of the day.
Not quite.
Okay.
Not
All right.
quite.
It's great.
Would you like to take over this
Well,
segment?
I just wonder. I feel like we've been here for hours, but also I really thought that was a great letter.
That was a great letter.
Go ahead.
Cool. And then we have Adil Sataripur. He wrote, Hey, Jian, I don't know why you change your correct pronunciation of the word diaspora to diaspora. It's all Keon's fault. You see, even Jane Lewison says diaspora. It's pronounced diaspora, both in the US and UK, according to the Cambridge Dictionary.
Is he trying to say diaspora?
He's saying that diaspora is correct. You, however, always pronounce it from the beginning, diaspora.
Conversations from, to, and about the Iranian diaspora.
Diaspora.
right.
Anyway, agree to disagree.
When's the letter of the day?
Right now, actually. Woo. And I will just say, this next user is tough to please, which I appreciate. You know, he's an avid listener and always has
negative things to say.
Not negative. He's a tough critic. Let's put it that way. So the fact that he wrote this beautiful letter, I'm sorry, I had to just draw it to your attention.
Okay.
So Gashasp Nodon on YouTube wrote, as a longtime listener and admirer of the Golha program, I want to express my gratitude to Mrs. Lewison for the Golha internet radio station and everything she does for Iranian culture and music. Golha is such a treasure of traditional Persian music and musicians. I hope more Iranians find interest in Golha and get to know better the great masters of contemporary traditional Persian music through this program. Thank you, Roqe, for inviting Mrs. Lewison.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gashasp. You have the letter of the day. Thank you, Captain Reza. Thank you, Groovy Shaya. Thank you, the fabulous Keon. This is full time for Roqe for today. We're going to go out on that song by Anushirvan Rohani, Homayun Shajarian, arranged by Reza Rohani, called Sarnavesht, that we were talking about. Thank you to all of you for listening and sharing our content. Remember, the hub of all things Roqe, if you want to see past episodes or get in contact with us, roqemedia.com. You can find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. Thank you again for listening. See you Thursday. Mizun Bashin.
سرنوشت را باید از سر نوشت شاید این بار کمی بهتر نوشت عاشقی را غرق در باور نوشت قصه ها را قصه دیگر نوشت از کجا این باور آمد که گفت گر رود سر بر نگردد سر نوشت بکاری از دل گل گل براری در زمستان در بهاران زیر باران گل بکاری گر بخواهیم گر نخواهیم باغ باغه روزگاری سرنوشت را باید از سر نوشت شاید این بار کمی بهتر نوشت عاشقی را غرق در باور نوشت قصه ها را قصه دیگر نوشت از کجا این باور آمد که گفت گر رود سر بر نگردد سر نوشت تو روزی راز این بازی بدانی نکته رمزش بخوانی لحظه های زندگی چون موج دریاست، گرچه سرد و سخت زیباست. موج این دریا گرت از سر گذشته، سرنوشتت سر گذشته. بر فراز قله باور سفر کن، بال خود را بازتر کن، همچو حافظ پای کوبان و غزل خوان، لشکر غم را بسوزان. بر فلک سقفی نمانده این زمانه، پر بزن تا بیکرانه. سرنوشت را باید از سر نوشت، شاید این بار کمی بهتر نوشت. عاشقی را غرق در باور نوشت، قصه ها را قصه دیگر نوشت. از کجا این باور آمد که گفت، گر رود سر بر نگردد سر نوشت. قصه ای از سر نوشت، قصه ای از سر